Bernie Sanders went on Theo Von's podcast. This guy's from the Rogan universe, but maybe not the worst of them, definitely.
He's a comedian, and Rogan is sort of squatting on the comedian podcast circuit at this point.
Yeah, he's made a lot of specials happen for people. He's a bit of a kingmaker, so I can understand why comedians feel like they need to kind of be in good graces with him.
The expanded Rogan-verse, even some Marvel properties are good. Even some Marvel movies are good now. Look at X-Men 97, right? Even that was good.
Even that, right. So Theo has a good conversation here with Bernie Sanders. This is how the interview kicked off for the most part.
Well, they've advanced a little bit, but...
Bernie Sanders, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be with you, Theo.
I really appreciate it. Whenever you started in politics, I'm sure that there was like a real idea of like one person can really affect change, right? Do you think that that's still possible today with like a lot of the lobbies and stuff that they have that goes on?
Well, I think, one of the points I think everybody knows is you have a government dominated by big money interests, right? That's no great secret. So you have these billionaires now and their super PACs. If you're a billionaire, you can contribute hundreds of millions of dollars to elect people, to feed people. If you're a large corporation or you represent the pharmaceutical industry, do you know how many lobbyists there are in Washington, D.C. representing the big drug companies? Take a wild and crazy guess.
2,000.
You got it. That's a pretty good guess. About 1,800.
Wow.
So there are 100 members of the Senate and 435 members of the House. Got it? 535. And you got 1,800 lobbyists. Well-paid, former leaders of the Democratic Party, leaders of the Republican Party. They're there to say, hey, Congress, do everything you can to make sure we make as much money as possible, and who gives a damn whether people can afford the prescription drugs they need. So that's power.
So you have a whole other drug government almost going on.
Absolutely.
That's even bigger than our own government. Numbers-wise.
Well, not big. We can define what we mean by bigger. But
that's fair.
But if you look at Wall Street, the power of Wall Street, the drug companies, the insurance companies, the fossil fuel industry, you have enormous wealth, enormous power. And if your question is it government that tells them what to do, or they tell what the government to do? More the latter. They tell the government what to do. Very powerful.
Does it feel like that's changed over your time, like in politics, or has it always been that way?
I think to some degree, money talks, right?
Yeah.
No great secret. That's always been the case. It's worse now, and I'll tell you why. As a result of this Citizens United Supreme Court decision, you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
So people brought action. Billionaires really brought action. They said, hey, it's undemocratic. You're taking away my freedom of speech, right? I got a First Amendment right. We're on TV now. You could say whatever you want to say, and I'm a billionaire, and I want to spend unlimited sums of money to defeat this candidate or support this candidate, and you have laws on the books now which restrict my freedom to buy the election. You understand what I'm saying?
100%.
Okay. And the Supreme Court said, well, guys, you're right. You're billionaires. You should be able to spend as much money as you want to buy elections. And that's what you have. So right now, this is literally the truth. You have super PACs where billionaires can put unlimited amounts of money, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to defeat people they don't like or to support people they do like. That's power. And that is a corruption of what democracy is supposed to be. Look, you and I can disagree on an issue, all right? 10 people. We argue it out, we vote, I get the majority, you get the majority, somebody wins, somebody loses. I don't think billionaires should be able to buy elections.
And I think most people think that. Most people are like, why are corporations or companies allowed to like give money to candidates and influence elections, right? Almost every person I know says that should be right. No. Whose responsibility is it to make sure it doesn't happen? Is it ours or is it the politicians?
Well, what happened is there were laws put in place, not as strong as I would like, but did limit the power of big money.
Yeah.
Okay. And what that Supreme Court decision said is what Congress did was unconstitutional, denied big money their freedom of speech. If you're a billionaire, you have freedom of speech. That means you can run ads all over the day and to beat Bernie Sanders, beat anybody. And that's what happened. So what we have got to do now is once again pass legislation that will do that.
Are there politicians that aren't?
That's an interesting way how they opened it up, right? And if again, I don't know a ton about him except for the fact that he comes from the Rogan universe. So it's hard for me to say what his politics are. But if there's got to be some crossover with fans, and that's an argument that, with anti-vaxxer people, I actually try to deploy a little bit, which is like, they're concerned about the greed of big pharma. They're concerned about the pharmaceutical companies gouging them and not feeling secure about, what's going into their bodies. And Bernie does a really good job there of widening that conversation into other sectors and other lobbying efforts, because that's the problem. It's not just one malevolent industry. It's regulatory capture as it relates to all industries.
Yeah, I think Bernie's really good at the common sense frame here, and appealing to that. And you want to set up this next
well, because this is amazing. I'd seen this before I'd seen the beginning. By the end of this, it seems like the message had gotten through to Theo Von. And this is a really good explanation, I think, of the alienation people feel under late stage capitalism.
We should be having a tremendous discussion why we're the only country on earth that to guarantee healthcare. It doesn't take place on television. We should be talking about massive income and wealth inequality. There are 3 people in America who own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. Think that's appropriate?
No, sir.
Okay.
I think there should be a limit on how much a person can earn.
Okay.
To be honest with you, maybe, some millions, but I don't think it should be billions. Someone should.
I agree with you. I agree with you, actually. And I think most Americans would. When's the last time you've seen that discussion on NBC? It ain't going to take place. All right. We have.
But that's what the people want, though.
Yes, that is exactly. That's why you're a success, and why other people, with very limited resources, if you like, because you don't see that type of discussion. I just did a poll. My campaign did a poll just on these issues. Talking about issues that working class people want and need that are almost never discussed in politics or in the corporate media. And the answer is people are hurting. They want change. No one's talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's like, I don't know, the people don't even get thought of anymore, it feels like a lot of times. And here's the toughest part, I think, Bernie, is as a person who, has felt like in their life, maybe their father died in a war, their grandfather died in a war, and they've tried to pay their taxes and be a, considerate person in their town or their country. After a while, those good people starts to erode a little. Because they don't feel like, and they lose their sense of purpose, man. When you lose the fabric of your society, a lot of people, that's how they didn't even realize it. A lot of us don't even realize we identify as an American. And when you realize, well, America, it's nothing, but it's a shell LLC for fucking big corporations. Then what am I? I'm just a idiot, and you almost feel ashamed of yourself, or you can, anyway, I don't know. A lot of that stuff I just don't see how people think that that's good, or how you're going to still be able to get people to buy in.
Theo, I think you said it better than I did.
That's pretty well said at the end there, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's why they keep it off. That's why they keep it off of television. So people feel like when they have those feelings that they're the only ones who have those feelings. Instead, what you see on television is people who earn, hundreds of thousands of dollars being on television, or millions of dollars being on television, or writing for the New York Times or some, New York Times adjacent outlet, saying that like we have to give money to billionaires because there won't be jobs otherwise. And then if you're sitting there without a job, you're like, what jobs? Like what jobs exist? The first clip, I remember, it feels like forever ago when Citizens United, when, getting big money out of elections was one of the biggest topics of our presidential election. 2016, I guess it would have been.
I wrote my thesis on that in college.
I haven't heard that talk in 4 or 5 years. Like it's just been abandoned. Not just Medicare for all and all the other progressive policies that Bernie championed in 2016 have been, because they were co-opted by Democratic Party. You heard everyone talking about them in the 2020 primary. Everyone was saying the same things, and then the moment Joe Biden took over, and the narrative just moved on. Like you don't talk about big money in politics anymore, because there are enough like tech billionaires who pretend to be Democrats that it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, because Hillary outspent people. I mean, Donald Trump, I think, towards the end.
She did, yeah, she did, and she fundraised more than him, and that is exactly right. I'm hoping that we can bring that back into the conversation. That's something I think that the Harris campaign could use more of, and it's also just what Vaughn said there at the end about kind of people losing their sense of national identity and community as we increasingly corporatize everything, and as the public square or as public space becomes private space or atomized. What that does, as you know, we begin to degrade from like a social safety net and social cohesiveness standpoint from eras where we prioritize like more social spending, or when we say had like a near 90% marginal tax rate for some of the wealthiest people in the country to distribute some more resources. It just it adds to alienation because people are heavily individualized, and then creates deep resentment and sadness. So like when we talk about the loneliness epidemic in this country for men, and maybe some young men that watch this guy's show, that's in part a lot due to the fact that we don't prioritize creating a society through taxing the wealthy and creating robust social services where you can have a life and make social connections outside of your workplace.
Literally, it's suggested drop shipping scams, Bitcoin, and all these other passive income vampire strategies to like self-actualize yourself.
Yeah, I mean, since the 80s, America has become a country defined by individual competition with one another. Mm-hmm. You know, everyone sees their neighbor as a competitor for, you know, sexual success if you're an incel, a competitor for monetary success. And that's why women and Black people shouldn't be allowed in the workplace. You know, in some ways, the suburbs have become the best example of the ways in which our communities have become artificial, where people move out to the suburbs to live in essentially little castles, little silos, where they're, you know, quarter acre is a moat, and they don't want to see their neighbors. They build those big fences. I know a lot of my notions of the suburbs come from like Twitter and episodes of House Hunters, but it seems to be the main appeal. You move out of the city so that you don't have to hear the children that your neighbors have above, and so people don't have to see your kids. There's a good, I think, book that's popular, if a bit like Libby, Bowling Alone. Bowling Alone, that was very popular in the, you know, back when I was in college and in grad school, that really explains how this idea of shift from being a community where people have bowling leagues and different kinds of clubs that you belong to became like, you know, I hate my neighbor. Now we're on the neighborhood. Now we're on like the neighborly app talking trash about each other. It's very toxic. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, you're saying so much good stuff there. Like the 90s and the early 2000s did explore through art some things about suburban social alienation, but not really in a way that I think was more critical of like rank, I don't know, deregulation and consumerism and neoliberalism and stuff like that.
Well, there's one bit of lyric from the Cleaners from Venus song called No Go for Louise McNeese. The end goes, they'll package up rebellion like a pot of clotted cream, which is, I don't know if Brandon, you know, that's a type of dessert confection.
It is. Yeah.
Then they'll sell it back at twice the price to nullify the dream, and all your friends and lovers and the places that you knew, you'll wonder what became of them and what became of you. It's no go, my Mooney Rose. It's no go tomorrow. All we are tiny blips in a data bank called sorrow. But I want to play this from Tupac, because that thing he said about people shouldn't be so rich, that is something that I think a lot of people who come from normal circumstances and become extremely wealthy, that's a natural progression for them to follow until it's beaten out of them, I think, by people like Joe Rogan, frankly. But here's Tupac in an interview, and I always thought this was amazing.
Oh, no sound.
No sound playing.
Too much money here. I mean, nobody should be hitting lotto for 36 million and we got people starving in the streets. That is not idealistic. That's just real. That is just stupid. There's no way Michael Jackson should have, or whoever Jackson, should have $1,000,000 billion and then there's people starving. There's no way. There's no way that these people should own planes and their people don't have houses, apartments, shacks, drawers, pants. I know you're rich. I know you got $40 billion, but can you just keep it to one house? You only need one house. And if you only got 2 kids, can you just keep it to 2 rooms? I mean, why have 52 rooms and you know there's somebody with no room? It just don't make sense to me. It don't. And then these people celebrate Christmas. They got big trees, huge trees, all the little trimmings. Everybody got gifts, and then somebody's starving. And they're having a white Christmas. They're having a great Christmas, eggnog and the whole nine.
Yeah.
Didn't even make it to 27, which is when, like, you know,
Not
a lot of
like
rockers
that.
die. He died. But, like, I mean, well, what'd you say?
That's not speaking like that. No one makes it to 27.
No,
speaking
you're
like
right.
that.
You're right. I mean, like the other rockers or artists that died at 27, but, like, I mean, truly losing Tupac was a massive loss for culture.
And and the industry.
Yep.
And I mean, I think, you know, you mentioned Joe Rogan a second ago, Matt, and I think that's tangentially touches a good point. A lot of people just don't understand that this money that billionaires are accumulating, just how much it actually is, but also that it comes from real people's pockets. Like, a lot of that has been abstracted now by, like, the ways in which wealth and, like, how your boss's boss never has any interaction with you, lives, you know, not even in the same city, much less the same neighborhood. But a good example is that, like, people don't know how little UFC fighters are paid. People like to, you know, support Dana White and how much money he has and you know, power slap, and they don't realize that he has that money because he pays those fighters like $12 an hour to beat the crap out of each other.
They break their bodies for him.
Exactly. And when people find that out, of course they can be horrified. Only the most sycophantic UFC cucks could possibly not be. But a lot of people just don't know. They assume that if you see someone on television, if you see someone a record contract, that they have to be making millions of dollars. And no, that money just goes to the pockets of people like Dana White, to the pockets of people like the head of A&R, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And it doesn't necessarily translate that, you know, fame specifically, but that doesn't translate to money. It doesn't translate to anything. And that's just a microcosm of the same effect that everyone has at their jobs, like how labor is being exploited and extracted.
And that's why class consciousness can alleviate or help alleviate social alienation in that way, because maybe, as Theo's saying there, you know, he said, you feel ashamed of yourself. That's really what stuck out to me in that clip, is the internalized shame of not being able to live up to, you know, the standards set by an unrealistic kind of capitalist framework. Like, people talk all the time about how young girls on social media or teenagers or young women feel like they have to compare themselves body-wise to other women on social media, and how that increases mental health issues for young women in particular. But, you know, maybe part of what increases broadly some mental health issues for people is when they see these, like, aspirational lifestyles and this insane consumption on social media that you're supposed to feel shame about if you don't achieve it, because that's what the American dream is about. When in reality, if you have the education that you describe, Brandon, where it's like Dana White has all this money because he puts his boot on the neck of all the people below him, that can be a really energizing thing for people, regardless of, like, if I were to go through this politics, I probably wouldn't agree with a lot of things. But this is the kind of stuff that can, for at least a fraction of those listeners, maybe give them a little bit of hope for the future and relief and, like, an understanding of how to make change. You
know, we played that extended clip up top, and I would have kept it running even longer if it wasn't so indulgent. But Vaughn, to his credit, is active for an organization called Power to the Patients, which, if your country has to have an organization called that, you may need to reassess some things. But it's all about showing people the different sort of pricing things that are hidden in medical billing. That's great. And it's clearly, like, raising his consciousness on the level, because he's dealing with people who are going bankrupt because they have goddamn cancer. We bankrupt people for cancer in this country, and nobody wants that. And I just would say, like, it's not just about, like, people making stronger financial decisions because they have all the info about how they're being reamed by these companies that have them over a barrel. We need to control these companies using the only thing that's powerful enough to stop them, which is Uncle Sam, which is why they spend so much money to control it.
Yeah. And last thing on that point is just when you brought up suburbia, there's a reason that moral panics also are very prevalent in suburban societies, where they're so much more susceptible. Suburban societies is a stupid way to frame it, but, like, suburban neighborhoods and that class of people, like bridge and tunnelers to New York, or dads that read the New York Post and moms that listen to true crime, where they can otherize people in society because they have less social connection. it helps divide people as opposed to bringing them together, and they see other human beings as boogeymen as opposed to everybody being in it together to try to up against massive forces.
It's also why public spaces were eroded. You look at public beaches, public pools, those were eroded, and a lot of this stuff is eroded using racism in America. A lot of these, like the divides in the working class, the divides in society are caused by just racist narratives about how we have to shut down public pools. We have to shut down public parks and public spaces because now Black people can use them. You see us saying a lot of that stuff with charter schools now. It's about making sure that we can keep segregating our society so that people can keep being divided amongst the working class.
Absolutely. All right, guys, I'm sorry. No more time for calls. We're going to read some IMs and then get out of here. I apologize. Augie's
Never
left.
apologize.
I know. I should learn. But I am a woman, so
Never apologize, never explain.
never.
What the Queen says.
I had a female teacher or professor in college who took me aside one time and said, "Stop apologizing. Stop it. It's undercutting the points you're making in class." So I was like, all right.
Does not surprise me at all.
But I'm going to keep doing it.
I love apologizing. It's disarming. Like if you don't mean it, apologies are a great way to end conversations. Like, I'm sorry, and just move on.
Yeah, I know, right.
No, that's not how Emma does it. Emma will run the dishwasher before the show starts and then apologize for how loud it is.
And I'm running the dishwasher cleaning like Sam's cups. But well, okay, but that was supposed to be a secret.
We're exposing stuff.
Okay, so the secret is that
Matt
sometimes
leaks.
I use this dishwasher that Sam doesn't like instead of hand washing them to just do a deep clean for all the mugs because I don't think the sink does the best job. And Sam doesn't like it because sometimes the logo comes off, but I found a formula of not putting it on too high heat. But now you've doxed my little ritual. Whatever.
We need you to be Mamala of the country.
I am
Mama of the studio.
I'm Mamala of the office.
Kamala never apologizes.
You're right. I should girl boss my way out of this
Girl
situation.
boss, gaslight, gatekeep. The 3 Gs.
Transphobia Real said, Emma, shouldn't you give a warning or do better research about someone you're reacting to in good terms? Theo Von has strong anti-trans views, wants separate bathroom sports leagues for us. It's sick that these people do some populist style interviews and well-intentioned people think, hey, he's right about this. Let's listen more and then go to the deep shit views he has. As activists, we expect better from the crew.
I flagged the position he had about the police, and apparently we let migrants do it. That is part of the water here when it comes to doing this. I am fully willing to go into views expressed by Theo Von and any other Joe Rogan guest about trans people. It's the territory, and this is frankly good messaging, and it's people are going to see it. We can counter the trans stuff too, and we do here. Like I don't know, like at least personally, I don't know.
I mean, to speak to that, I don't get my politics from comedians. I understand that there are a lot of them and people really like to because they are attracted to the fame. I look at stuff like that as more exemplary of how widespread these ideas are. Yeah. Where like people would say that someone who holds bigoted views on trans people, on race, pro-cop views, can't possibly have, any good views at all. But for me, it explains how widespread these actually are and how views like that, his problematic ones, the ones you're espousing, are used to further drive a wedge, like I said about racism, between a working class that has no space for them and no need for them either, because they're not what he's describing as holding society down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would have said the same thing when Bernie went on Joe Rogan 4 years ago, and I don't agree with the people who think he shouldn't.
I want to make our tent bigger too, right? Like, so if any one of his fans comes across our stuff, it'd be cool to
contest wherever you can.
Bring them in, yeah.
The tent is big. As long as they abandon those ideas at the flap. I don't want to say the door. What's the door? A tip of flap. They're welcome in. I think that's the big tent has a space for more populism as long as people understand that there are rules to being part of the circus.
Okay, tent flap. I was like, I got what you were saying. Is like, didn't think that everyone needs to come in through the doggy door or whatever. That's what I associate with flap. But tent flap makes more sense.
Someone grew up in the suburbs.
Yeah,
doggy door.
I think it's pretty obvious. I grew up in the suburbs.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.